In 1978, at around 1 a.m., an American couple, Mr. and Mrs. William J. Franklin, were returning home from an evening out. They decided to drive over to their barn and have a quick look inside to see if the cows were okay before heading home and turning in for the night. While checking, Mr. Franklin spots a strange, ominous light moving in the night sky. This would be the first of many bizarre and frightening things to come for the Franklins and their neighbors. This case was investigated by UFO researcher Larry McNeil. Even though he had investigated hundreds of cases in the 70s, McNeil considered this to be one of the strangest. It was 1 a.m. Mr. and Mrs. Franklin pulled off the main highway and drove down a snow-covered dirt road leading up to their farm. William decided to do a quick check of his cows in the barn. He stepped out of the car, walked over to the barn, pried open the door, and peered inside. From what he could tell, everything seemed fine. As he was closing the door, he noticed a bright light in the night sky. It was a clear, cool night. All the stars were visible. Whatever this was, he could tell right away that it wasn't a star. It was too big and moving too fast. William immediately called to his wife to look into the sky. By this time, Mrs. Franklin was quite tired and brushed him off. He again told her to look into the sky, and this time she did. "My goodness, it's bright," she called out. At that moment, the object grew very white and shot out of sight. Excited, the pair rushed home and dialed up the state police to tell of the strange light they had just witnessed. They dispatched an officer who arrived at the farm and spoke with the couple. They insisted the officer come outside and watch the sky with him in case it came back. The officer indulged them, but quickly grew tired. Before leaving, he attempted to convince the Franklins that they had merely seen a star or a fast-moving plane. William knew better. No plane could move the way this thing did. After the officer left, the couple decided to call it a night. They assumed that whatever it was, it probably wasn't coming back. As the Franklins laid down to sleep, another family a few miles down the road were about to have their own strange encounter. It was now 4:30 a.m. The Fox family, Dale Fox and her 2 children, were asleep in their small house. Mr. Fox was not home, as he worked the night shift. He usually left at around 1 a.m. and would return home in the morning after his shift and sleep through the day. The 2 children, sleeping in the basement, were suddenly awakened by a loud banging noise, followed by the appearance of flashing lights that lit up the basement. The noise and the strange lights terrified the 2 children, who promptly hid under the covers. They did not rouse until the next morning. While getting ready for school, the 2 children told their mother of the strange occurrences, but she assumed they were imagining things and simply disregarded it. She didn't think much of it until later that morning when, while speaking to a neighbor, she learned that other people in the area had complained of hearing loud banging and seeing bright, flashing lights, the same things her children had told her about. After hanging up, she began to mull over in her mind what might have caused the banging and the flashing lights. She wondered if maybe a motorcyclist had experienced trouble and was banging on doors looking for help. She then ruled that out. She had 2 big German shepherds, and had somebody come knocking on their door in the wee hours of the morning, they would have most certainly barked up a storm, alerting her to their presence. The dogs were kept outside and were trained to go only as far as the road and not leave the property, so there was no way a person would risk coming to the door at that time of night anyways. That afternoon, Dale went out shopping with friends. She was surprised when she returned home to find the dogs gone. They were very well-trained dogs and had never left the property before, so she found it strange. Further, they weren't the most friendliest of dogs, so she feared that, had they actually wandered away on their own for whatever reason, There was a chance that they might actually hurt somebody. She called a friend who immediately assisted in the search for the two dogs. The two ladies followed their tracks in the snow, which led down the main road and up to a small nearby pond. From there, the tracks crossed onto a frozen snowy pond and up to where a dead calf was laying. The odd thing about the calf was that its legs were tied together. But that's not the strangest part. See, the dog's tracks ended right there. The tracks walked up to the calf and ended. Even stranger, there was another set of tracks, oversized, that also walked up to the calf and seemingly ended. The dog tracks and the other track only went in one direction, up to the dead calf, and then they ended. From what they could tell, the strange oversized prints started at the edge of the frozen pond, reached the calf, and then they too vanished as if whatever or whoever it was had just flown away or was sucked up into the air along with the dogs by something in the sky. It was bizarre. The two women looked at each other, puzzled. They simply could not make sense of what they were seeing. Why had the thing responsible for taking the dogs and the other thing not also taken the calf? They immediately returned to Dale's home and notified the police, who sent out a trooper, the same one who had taken the Franklin's call the previous night, to investigate. He substantiated the dead calf and the footprints that led to nowhere. He began to rethink the Franklin sighting from the night before. What else could explain this? How else could the large footprints and the dog tracks go only so far in the snow, stop, and suddenly vanish as though suddenly lifted up and flown away? When Dale returned home later, after speaking with the police officer at the site, she was again surprised to find her two German shepherds hiding under the front porch. They were panting heavily, cringing and whining. They appeared to be terrified of something. It took them many hours to return to normal. Interestingly, when people returned to the site a little later, they were surprised to find the dead calf had vanished, and the tracks appeared to have been meticulously wiped away by somebody. Who took the calf and covered the tracks is anyone's guess.